Welcome to part 2 of the rather poorly named Trabant engine rebuild series. I say it's poorly named because today we're not going to be looking at the engine at all. No. Today we're going to be rebuilding, not that. The Trabant's exhaust is not equipped with one of those. We're going to be rebuilding this, the Trabant's gearbox. Before I got to the point you see here, I had to do two things. First, I had to drain out the gearbox oil, for obvious reasons, and then I had to make my fancy custom gearbox mount stand dismantling thing. Tool, jig. One of those. Before we begin tearing into this gearbox, I'd like to draw your attention to the throwout bearing, because the Trabant does not have one. This is a throwout bushing made of graphite. Yes, you heard me right, the Trabant's clutch is disengaged with a pencil. Now I have to admit, I'm not quite as comfortable tearing into this gearbox as I was when I tore into the engine. I've never been inside a transmission before. So to guide me along the way, I've brought out here with me my English translated Trabant shop manual, seen here in PDF form. If it can't help me, at least it'll provide me with some comic relief, because the translations in here are hilarious. Step 1. Screw off the front end cover from the driven shaft and lay it aside together with the screw conveyor. Take care that the conveying screw, which was centered by the manufacturer, will not be distorted. What? Alright, I'm just going to take this front plate off and hope for the best. There we go. Be careful there. Now let's see what happens when I pull this plate off. What? I have no idea what this does. I often joke about being out of my depth, but I have seriously no idea what this does. As far as I know, that was the only thing connecting the two halves other than the multitude of bolts. So, I guess let's just start cranking on the multitude of bolts. Alright, let's see what the manual says before I go whacking at it with the happy-go-lucky stick. Remove all the fastening screws from the casing. Done. Use 2 screwdrivers and lift the casing lower part at the lugs cast on for this purpose. During this operation, the shaft should remain in the casing upper part. Well, this one's interesting. Draw out the speedometer drive from the bush. Alright, I believe I have everything I need in order to split this gearbox into 2 bits. I believe these 2 flanges, here and here, are for prying it apart with a screwdriver. Screwdriver in here on both sides, and just pry apart. I just consulted my manual and I missed a step. I have to take off this throwout bearing and release yoke and everything. And the reason I missed that step before is because the manual refers to this as the slip ring disengaging device. Not a throwout bearing, not a release bearing, slip ring disengaging device. So I have to take that out first. And once I tap these 2 halves back together, this should fall back into its place because it won't be bound anymore. There we go. Here's a closer look at the graphite bushing, if you were curious. It looks like it has tons of life left, but I'm going to get a new one anyway, because it's cheap. Now I have to drive out this pin. Oh, that shot off. There we go. If I pull this pin out, this spring and this yoke are going to go flying, probably in my face, or at the camera. One would be worse than the other. I haven't decided which one yet is worse. I'm going to hold it back with a shop towel blanket, so neither one of us can see what's going to happen here. I don't know how I'm going to reassemble this. Okay. Oh, that wasn't so bad. There we go. Now everything's out. Here's the release yoke, here's the spring, here's the shaft. This is how it connects to the clutch cable. Very simple stuff. Now with the release yoke out of the way, I should be able to pry the 2 halves apart. All right, I need some elevation. I need some uplifting. Let's get above it. Show it who's boss. Nope. Oh, it released. It released! Can I grab a hold of it? Can I lift? Oh, the differential is part of this. It's heavier than I was expecting. Oh, and this should stay in the bottom. Please don't drop anything. Oh, that was not supposed to stay in this top half, or the bottom half of the case. Oh, that was, this is heavy. How do I go? How do I get down? I'm carrying half the gearbox. This wasn't supposed to happen. Here we go. Ah, garbage. All the bolts that I wanted to stay in there are falling out. Like that one. Yes, this goes back here somewhere. Yeah, that goes in there, something like that. There we go. That's how that goes in there. Use 2 screwdrivers and lift the casing lower part at the lugs cast on for this purpose, which I did. During this operation, the shaft should remain in the casing upper part. This is the upper part. It didn't stay there. They came with the lower part. That annoyed me, but now they're back in. I'm doing well. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I believe this was supposed to stay in the upper part as well. Like so. Now, normally it would be about time for me to tell you that once again, I'm not a mechanic. I don't know what I'm doing. This is for entertainment, not instruction. But given what you just witnessed, I'm sure that is patently obvious, and I don't really need to state that, do I? In fact, the only reason I'm comfortable doing this at all is because a new transmission from Germany is only 390 euros, which given the current exchange rate and take off the VAT, would be about $380 plus whatever shipping. So if I destroy this transmission, it's not a huge deal because I can get a brand new one for very cheap. But that said, I would like to use this one again. And I just kind of wanted to dig in here and see how it works. So it's about time I bring you in for a closer look as I learn how this works. Here's your look inside the Trabant's gearbox. I had to bring it down on the floor because this gearbox stand rose it too far off the table and the camera couldn't see over it. So this is gear 1, gear 2, 3, and 4. And reverse is down here somewhere. I'll go through the gears so you can see how that all goes together. This is first. Spin the input shaft. The output goes slowly. If I put it in second, no, that's third. I'll get there eventually. I don't usually have this problem when driving the car. Now the output shaft is spinning a little faster. I can still spin it backwards at this point. I put it in third. A little faster now. Can still spin it backwards. Now if I put it in fourth, it's very fast. And if I put pressure on this, I can spin the input shaft backwards and nothing happens because fourth gear has a freewheel device, which is stored in this big glob here, which allows you to coast downhill and the engine can return back to idle. So if this was coasting, well, I can grab this. There's some drag in the system. The engine can idle freely. Now the problem with my transmission is this freewheeling device. If I put it in fourth gear, it may or may not transfer power. It just slips occasionally and sometimes it locks up when it's doing the coasting thing. It has problems. I need to replace this freewheeling device, but now the issue is how? How do I get this off of this shaft? This is going to require some sit-down research is what this is going to require. All right, the next step, let's get these gears out of here. Start with the differential. Should just lift right out. Yes, as it does. There we go. All right, next let's take out the input shaft. That's still kind of in there pretty well. See if I can't pry it from the case using this woodworking tool and a wire. That's it. That was the ticket. All right. Now we remove the input shaft and set it aside. And here's the guts of the transmission, all splayed out. Beautiful, isn't it? You can see here in higher detail the freewheeling device on the input shaft. If I spin it this way, nothing, but it spins the other way, it engages. I just made yet another discovery about this gearbox. See this little red cover here? I'd always wondered what its purpose was, aside from provide a constant source of leaks. Well, now I found out. If I pop it out, this is the only way to access the selector rods, the little shafts here. That's the only way they come out. That's what that little red cap is for. I thought that was just designed as a place to provide constant leaks and maybe oil up the roads and keep the gravel dust down. But no, it serves a real purpose. All right, I've had some time to sit down and read my poorly translated manual, think about it a little bit, and I've determined something. I hate the smell of this gearbox oil. It's on my hands, it's on my jacket, it's permeating the shop. I can't get away from it and I hate it. And I've also determined that I think I can get this fourth gear off of here with minimal trouble. According to the manual, I just need a gear puller to pull this fourth gear off, and this bearing that sits in front of it should just come off with it. So I think that should be doable. I'm going to leave the differential and the intermediate shaft alone because there's nothing wrong with them, and the only reason I wanted to get into this gearbox at all was to tackle this freewheel gear here, because that is the problem child of this transmission. Wow, this is requiring a lot of force, mechanical motivation, as it were. I could use the shop press instead of a gear puller, and that'll save my hands. I'm going to do that. All right, satisfying. And here's what it looks like with the gear off. Here's the needle bearing that the gear was riding on, and inside here is the freewheel device. You can see that it turns one way, but it will not turn the other. Now this is the part I need to replace in here. If I pull this out, are these rollers going to go flying absolutely everywhere? That's what I'm afraid of. Oh, yep, they went everywhere. That's the freewheel device all in bits. Now I just need to order a new one, which is readily available on the internet. Right, as the title card just said, it's been 3 months since I stopped on this project. But the parts have come now. Even some extras have come, thanks to what I'll call some shipping mishaps. And I'm not exactly sure what I just said a minute ago in the video. However, I do know what I didn't say, and that's that I found out after I had turned the camera off what was wrong with the freewheel on the fourth gear in my Trabant transmission. This is fourth gear. Sitting inside of fourth gear on the shaft is the inner race of the freewheel, and holding it onto the shaft is this key on my style of transmission. There's 2 styles of transmission, we'll get to that later on. And this key is what holds it in place. And on mine, the key was sheared. I don't think I have it around anymore because it was just completely obliterated. And that explains why my fourth gear was intermittent at best and would slip, because this key was sheared, and occasionally the freewheel device would just slip on the shaft and would get no power transferred through it. So that's what was wrong with my freewheel. Now the sheared key was the only problem with my freewheel on the transmission, and I could probably just replace that key and get on with it, but since I'm in here, I decided to replace the entire freewheel assembly as well. And thanks to a shipping mishap, I now have 2 spares, and they're both of different type. Now the early style of transmission, which is what I have, I think it's before 1984 or something like that, the early style has a key that holds the freewheel onto the shaft, like I just showed you. The later style doesn't have a key, it just friction fits onto the shaft. You heat it up with a torch and it slips down on there and it's just jammed on there, basically. And I have both styles. Since I have both spares, I can choose between either the old style or the new style, but I'm going to stick with the old style with the key because I have been informed that the new style can work on this old style shaft, or you just heat it up with a torch and slip it on there and then it'll clamp itself to the shaft. But I have just below that area a bushing and a needle bearing cage that are made of some sort of plastic, possibly phenolic resin, I'm not really sure. But what I do know is that this stuff melts. And if I go heating this up with a torch and dropping it on there, it's possible these things could melt. And if I ever want to get this off again, I'll have to point the torch pretty much directly at that area, and it would be almost impossible to avoid melting these things. So that's why I'm going with the old style with the key. It doesn't involve any sort of torch work. Now that's all fine and dandy, but I'm missing an important bit here. It's the Woodruff key that keys the freewheel crate to the shaft. I didn't order one because they didn't have any to order. So what I've had to do is find out what size key goes in here, which is 4mm by 5mm, and go find, because I'm in America, an imperial-sized equivalent. And I happen to find this, which is exactly the right width to go into this slot here, but it's the wrong height. So I'm going to make a trip to the belt grinder now to try to shave this down to the right height. Now to assemble the new freewheel crate that I have. If you want to know how the freewheel works, here's your lesson. The freewheel consists of a grooved inner race, smooth outer race, fourth gear in this case, rollers, and the roller cage to keep all the rollers in place.
As it sits right now in this drawing, if the outer race or gear moves in either direction, the rollers will ride up their respective grooves, wedge into the outer race, and jam the whole mechanism. That's why the roller cage is linked to the inner race with a spring to push all the rollers to one side of their respective grooves. With the spring holding the rollers to one side, the mechanism still jams if turned one way, but spins freely in the other direction, because the spring-loaded roller cage is holding the rollers back, thus preventing them from wedging in the groove. And that's how fourth gear in the Trabant accomplishes one-way transfer of power, with a simple freewheel.
And here it is, all assembled. And I can spin it one way. Focus, you can spin it one way, but not the other way. One way, but not the other way. Assembling this was actually not anywhere near as hard as I thought it was going to be, but now that means I expect the problem to be putting it on here. I'm going to get that key lined up, get the wacky stick and hammer it down as gently as possible. And here it is, the completed input shaft, complete with new freewheel assembly that runs smoothly in one direction and not at all in the other, just like it's supposed to and didn't before intermittently. Now it's time to begin reassembly of the entire gearbox. By the way, did you notice I cleaned up the gearbox housing? Except for right here, the only part that's facing directly towards the camera. Cleaned up the rest of it. Anyway, time to reassemble everything. Input shaft in first. Now I did order new seals like this one up here for the entire transmission, but if I was smart, I would have ordered new ball bearings for, well, the entire transmission. But as you probably already gathered from the rest of this video, I'm not smart and I didn't order new ball bearings. So the good news is that all of these ball bearings look to be in fine shape, so I'm not too concerned. Something's off here. This isn't lined up quite like it should be. Everything's fine in the front, but I can't get this back cover on because it's sticking out that way too much. I need to consult my videological records to see what it looked like when I took it apart. Right, I'm back, and there's a couple of things I noticed in the video of taking this thing out of the transmission. One is that I put this seal into the seal housing backwards, and the other thing is this little ring here that's between the seal and the ball bearing is in the wrong place. This ring is supposed to be in between the ball bearing and the fourth gear here. So I need to take basically all of this apart again to put this in the right place, and then I need to squeeze this new seal out of here and put it in the right way round. Now to put it back in the correct orientation, which is fourth gear, this splitter plate thing, and then the ball bearing. As my dad used to always say, anything's worth doing is worth doing twice. And here's the completed input shaft. Again, this time with the seal facing the right way out and this little spacer plate here in the correct location. Now, it was actually not the fault of either of those two things being incorrect that caused the shaft to not fit in there correctly the first time. The actual reason was because this plate on the back here I had facing the other way where it interfered with the shaft. But it's a good thing that plate was backwards because that caused me to go back and look at the footage and find out that these other two things I had on there incorrectly. So I guess a happy accident. Now I need to put some RTV on this little dude here and put in the intermediate shaft in the differential. And this plate on the back here has its own O-ring that I've already replaced. It's just this plate on the front that needs the RTV. It's beautiful. And it's even driving the speedometer drive on the back. See right here? I forgot to add this little piece. It goes on like that. And now it can go on. And this has a new O-ring. Interestingly, the seal kit I have for this has O-rings the size of these cavities here. I wonder if the newer style of Trabant gearbox actually used O-rings on these places instead of ridged pieces of metal relying on silicone. And in goes the differential, again with new seals. I actually think the next step is to get the other half of the gearbox on top of this half. If I recall right, the manual The poorly translated manual doesn't call for an especially large amount of sealant between these two halves. In fact, the engine sealant, it calls for as thin of a sealant as possible. It actually calls for lacquer, which is paint. It's time for what people in car factories call the marriage, probably. And just like any good marriage, a beating is required. That was a joke. I need my Ryobi bolt drive-o-matic. There we go. Let's go around and snug these buggers down. What's the torque spec? I don't know. It's a Trabant. Aren't you supposed to be able to do everything with simple tools? That's what everyone keeps telling me. As you can see here, I did a much better job cleaning the bottom half of the transmission than the top half. Looks like I didn't even try for the top half. It's greasy as when it started out. But you can also see that there's a big hole here that needs capping off. This goes here, roughly there. And this is what the poorly translated manual refers to as the screw conveyor. I assume this has something to do with lubrication of the intermediate shaft. And it goes like so. I have the new gasket in place, and now to gently, very gently, fit this in here. This only goes on one way according to that plate that's behind it. And it goes on like that. Bolt drive-o-matic. Now the only thing I have left is the release bushing assembly. Ow. I did it! Well, almost. I still have to drive in that pin. And the last piece, I got a new graphite release bushing. Now I actually did have the option to get a proper release bearing with ball bearings in it, but I thought the graphite release bushing was cooler, so this is what I got. Come on! Get in there. Please? Well, I found the reason I'm having issue here. Here's the little clips that hold it into place. See how deep that goes? Here's the old release bearing. Goes in much deeper, so I think I'm going to have to drill out the one on the new bearing. Drill out this hole here to go deeper. But it should snap all the way down. There we go. There we go. And here it is. The gearbox is fully reassembled and nearly ready for action. Hopefully now I won't have any leaking, grinding, or not working problems with this transmission. Now, let's talk about gearbox oil. The proper and recommended gearbox oil to put in a Trabant gearbox is HLP 68 oil that can be found in Germany. Now, I've ordered this stuff from Germany before, had it shipped to the United States, and put it in this very gearbox. But this time around, when I ordered parts and the gearbox oil, I got an email a couple of days later saying, no, we can't ship any form of liquid to the United States. Customs will think it's a bomb or something. So they canceled my order of the gearbox oil. Now, normally this would mean I'd have to do some research to find an equivalent I can get in America for this HLP 68. But thankfully, I don't have to, because an industrious Trabant owner in Tennessee named James Seabold has already done that research for me. And he found out that this stuff is the American equivalent of that HLP 68 found in Germany. It is Mystic brand ISO 68 anti-wear hydraulic oil, and it can be found at Tractor Supply, which is where I got this bottle of it. He even went the extra mile and emailed the manufacturer of this stuff to find out that it was indeed the American equivalent of the HLP 68. So that's what I'll be putting into this gearbox later. The silicone's still drying and the gearbox is upside down, so I'm not going to put any fluids in there right now, but I will put this in there. So that's it. The Trabant's gearbox is now fully rebuilt to the best of my knowledge. So thank you for watching, and remember to stay tuned for part 3 of the Trabant engine rebuild series, where we'll actually be looking at the engine again instead of just the thing that's bolted to it and connects it to the wheels.